I pretended to be poor and naive when I met my fiancé's parents. Then I found out that. The moment I walked through those French doors, I knew I was either making the smartest decision of my life or setting myself up for the most spectacular disaster imaginable. Catherine Ashford's smile froze on her face like expensive champagne left out too long, turning from effervescent to flat in an instant. Her eyes swept over my plain cotton dress, my simple ballet flats, my drugstore mascara, and I could practically hear the calculator in her mind totaling up my worth and arriving at zero. She turned to her husband and said something she clearly thought I couldn't hear, but every word reached me perfectly. Well, I suppose we should be grateful she at least knows how to dress herself properly, even if the clothes are clearly from a discount store. That's when I knew this evening was going to be absolutely fascinating. My name is Victoria Chen. I'm 29 years old, and I need to tell you something important. For the past 11 months, I've been keeping a secret from the man I agreed to marry. Not a small secret like secretly hating his favorite restaurant. Not a medium secret like the fact that I still watch cartoons on Saturday mornings. No, my secret is that I'm worth approximately $42 million. Yes, you heard that right. 42 million. With an M. I'm the founder and majority shareholder of a boutique investment firm that specializes in sustainable technology ventures. I started it when I was 24 with money I inherited from my father, who was a brilliant but humble patent attorney. I've since grown that initial investment into something that would make most venture capitalists weep with envy. I hold equity stakes in 7 companies that have either gone public or been acquired. 3 of them are household names, though most people have no idea I'm connected to them. And my fiancé, Daniel Ashford, thinks I'm a junior analyst at a generic financial services company who shares a cramped apartment with 2 roommates and takes the bus to work every day. I never lied to him. Not technically. When we met at a networking event 11 months ago, when I was attending as an observer, not a participant, he asked what I did for work. I said I was in finance. He nodded and asked which firm. I gave him the name of my company. He'd never heard of it, assumed it was some mid-tier operation, and asked if I was in client services. I said something vague about portfolio management, and he filled in all the blanks himself. I simply never corrected his assumptions. Why would I do this? Why would I let the man I was dating, the man who eventually proposed to me with his grandmother's ring, believe I struggled to make rent when I could have bought his family's house 3 times over without even touching my primary accounts? Because my father taught me something before he died, something I've carried with me every single day since. He used to say, "Vicky, you'll meet 2 types of people in this world. Those who see your worth before they see your bank account, and those who only see dollar signs. Learn to tell the difference before it costs you everything." My father died when I was 21, just before I graduated from business school. He left me everything, not just money, but wisdom. He'd grown up poor, the son of immigrants who worked 18-hour days at a dry cleaner. He put himself through law school at night, built a career on brilliance and integrity, and amassed significant wealth by helping inventors protect their innovations. But he never forgot where he came from. He lived in a modest house in a middle-class neighborhood. He drove a reliable sedan that he kept for 15 years. He wore suits from department stores and ate lunch at diners. He donated millions to scholarship funds and immigrant assistance programs, but he did it anonymously. He taught me that wealth is a tool, not an identity, and that the measure of a person has nothing to do with what they own and everything to do with how they treat people who can do nothing for them. So when Daniel invited me to dinner at his parents' estate in the suburbs, when he mentioned nervously that his mother was particular about first impressions, when he hinted that this dinner might determine the trajectory of our future together, I made a choice. I decided to give the Ashford family the test my father would have given them. I would show up as the ordinary woman Daniel believed me to be. I would wear humble clothes, speak modestly about my circumstances, and observe carefully. I would watch how they treated someone they believed had nothing to offer them. Someone they thought was beneath their notice. Someone they considered unworthy of their precious son. Before you judge me, before you decide I was being manipulative or playing games, let me ask you something. Haven't you ever wondered what someone's family really thinks of you? Haven't you ever sensed that the smiles were performative and the warmth was manufactured? Haven't you ever wanted to know the truth, even if it hurt, rather than live in comfortable ignorance? I wanted to know. I needed to know. Because I wasn't just considering spending my life with Daniel, I was considering joining his family. And families, as my father also taught me, reveal who we really are. Now, before I continue with this story, I want to take just a moment. If you're enjoying this, would you please hit that subscribe button for Bridal Confessions? We share true stories like this every single day, stories about love, betrayal, family drama, and everything in between. Your subscription helps us grow and bring you more content. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love knowing there are people all over the world listening to these stories. Okay, back to what happened that night. The Ashford estate wasn't exactly what I'd expected, but it confirmed everything I'd suspected. The house was large, certainly, but it had the unmistakable feel of wealth that was more impressive than it was substantial. The kind of place that looked expensive but revealed its cracks if you looked closely enough. The fountain in the circular driveway was grand, but had a slightly greenish tint to the water. The landscaping was elaborate, but had brown patches that suggested the gardeners had been recently let go or were being paid late. As I pulled up in my 10-year-old Honda Civic, a car I genuinely loved for its reliability and fuel efficiency, I saw the curtains move in one of the front windows. Someone was watching me arrive. Assessing me. Judging me before I'd even made it to the door. Daniel met me in the driveway, and I noticed immediately that something was different about him. His smile was tighter than usual. His hug was brief and formal. And when his eyes flicked over my outfit, a simple navy dress I'd bought specifically for this occasion from a mid-range department store, I saw something I'd never seen before. Disappointment. Maybe even embarrassment. "You look nice," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Very understated. I filed that observation away for future reference. Inside, the house was a showcase of what I privately thought of as aspirational wealth. Everything was designed to impress, but nothing felt personal or lived in. The art on the walls was expensive but generic, the kind of pieces interior decorators sold to clients who wanted to appear cultured without actually knowing anything about art. The furniture was high-end but uncomfortable, chosen for aesthetics rather than function. Fresh flowers in every room, but all the same arrangement from the same expensive florist, suggesting someone who wanted the appearance of taste without the effort of actual taste. And there, standing in the marble-floored foyer like a queen awaiting tribute, was Catherine Ashford. She was exactly what I'd imagined and somehow worse. In her late 50s, she had the kind of face that had been well maintained through the ministrations of talented professionals, smooth but not quite natural, tight but not quite youthful. Her blonde hair was styled in an elaborate updo that probably required an hour in a salon chair. She wore a cream-colored suit that screamed designer label, accessorized with pearls that I could tell, even from a distance, were genuine and valuable. But it was her smile that told me everything I needed to know. It was perfect and practiced and absolutely devoid of warmth. It was the smile of someone who had learned early in life that appearances mattered more than authenticity. "Victoria," she said, extending her hand like she was granting an audience rather than greeting a guest. "How lovely to finally meet you. Daniel has told us so little about you." The emphasis on "so little" was subtle but unmistakable. It was both an accusation. Why had Daniel kept me hidden? And an insult. Clearly there wasn't much worth telling. I shook her hand, noting the limpness of her grip, the way she let her fingers rest in mine without actually engaging. It was a handshake that communicated exactly what she thought of me, not worth the effort of a real greeting. "It's wonderful to meet you, Mrs. Ashford," I said warmly. "You have a beautiful home." "Thank you," she replied, already turning away to lead us toward the living room. "It's been in the family for generations." "Well, Thomas's family, of course. I simply married into it." The correction was unnecessary and pointed. She wanted me to know that she had married into this wealth, that she understood the social dynamics of marrying up, and that she was now the gatekeeper who would decide if I was worthy of doing the same. Daniel's father, Thomas Ashford, was waiting in the living room, and he was a completely different energy than his wife. Where Catherine was all sharp edges and calculated poses, Thomas was rumpled and wary. He looked like a man who had once been vital, but had been slowly worn down by years of living with someone who demanded perfection at all times. He shook my hand with genuine warmth, his grip firm and friendly. "Victoria, great to meet you. Daniel's been talking about you nonstop. Come in, come in. Can I get you something to drink? Wine? Beer? We have a pretty good scotch if you're into that." "Water would be wonderful, thank you," I said. Catherine's eyebrows rose almost imperceptibly. "Water? Not even wine? I suppose some people prefer to keep their wits about them at all times." The implication was clear. I was either too unsophisticated to appreciate good wine or too calculating to let my guard down. There was no winning interpretation. Before I could respond, a voice called out from the hallway. "Sorry I'm late." Traffic was absolutely brutal. A woman swept into the room, and I knew immediately that this was Daniel's sister, Nicole. She had the same features as her brother: sharp cheekbones, bright blue eyes, perfectly straight teeth, but where Daniel had a certain softness to his personality, Nicole was all edges. She wore designer clothing with the casual confidence of someone who'd never worn anything else. Her handbag alone probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "You must be Victoria," she said, looking me up and down in a way that wasn't even trying to be subtle. "Interesting dress. Very practical." "Nicole," Daniel said, a warning in his voice. "What?" "I'm just saying it's practical. Nothing wrong with practical." She turned to her mother with a conspiratorial smile. "Remember when you wore that vintage Chanel to the Hendersons' party? Now that was impractical." Gorgeous, but impractical. The message was clear. They wore Chanel. I wore practical department store dresses. I was not one of them. Dinner was announced, and we moved to the dining room, which was as ostentatious as I'd expected. The table could have seated 20 people comfortably, but tonight it was set for just 5 of us, making the space feel deliberately cavernous. The china was fine, the crystal was genuine, and there were more pieces of silverware at each place setting than any human could reasonably need for one meal. I counted 4 forks. 4. For a single dinner. As we sat down, I noticed that Catherine had arranged the seating strategically. She was at the head of the table, naturally. Thomas was at the opposite end. Nicole was to Catherine's right. And Daniel and I were separated, placed on opposite sides of the table with Nicole between us. It was a seating arrangement designed to prevent us from presenting a united front, to isolate me and make me feel like I was the one being evaluated. Which, of course, I was. The first course arrived, some kind of soup that probably had a French name I wouldn't have been expected to know. Catherine took this opportunity to begin what I would later think of as the interrogation. "So, Victoria," she said, her spoon paused halfway to her mouth, "Daniel tells us you work in finance. That must be interesting." "It is," I said simply. "I enjoy it very much." "And what exactly do you do? Are you in sales? Marketing?" "I work in portfolio management," I said, which was technically true. "Oh, how nice. So you help wealthy clients manage their money?" She said this with the kind of smile that suggested she found the idea quaint, like I was a shopgirl helping rich women try on hats. "Something like that," I agreed. "And where did you study?" "Daniel went to Princeton, of course. His father and I both went to Yale." "I went to State," I said, naming a perfectly respectable public university. I didn't mention that I'd also been accepted to Harvard, Stanford, and MIT, or that I'd chosen State because they'd offered me a full scholarship and I'd wanted to save my father's money for starting my business. Catherine's smile tightened. "State. How democratic. I'm sure you got a perfectly adequate education." Adequate. That one word spoke volumes. Nicole jumped in. "So where do you live, Victoria? Daniel mentioned you have roommates." "I do," I confirmed. I did technically have roommates. My building had 2 other tenants, though I owned the entire building and lived in the penthouse by myself. But they didn't need to know that. Roommates. Nicole laughed. God, I remember having roommates in college. It was absolutely awful. I couldn't wait to get my own place. Of course, Daddy helped with the down payment, but still. "Nicole has a beautiful condo downtown," Catherine added. "Right in the heart of everything. Perfect for a young professional." The implication was clear. Nicole was a success. I was still struggling with roommates. Thomas, bless him, tried to change the subject. So Victoria, what do you like to do for fun? Any hobbies? I love reading, I said. And I've been learning to cook. Nothing fancy, just home cooking. How sweet, Catherine said. Home cooking. I haven't cooked in years. We have a chef who comes 3 times a week. I simply don't have the time for that sort of thing anymore. Between the charity boards and the country club, Mother is extremely busy, Nicole added, taking a sip of her wine. The conversation continued in this vein throughout the soup course and into the salad. Every question was designed to highlight the differences between us. Every answer I gave was met with barely concealed condescension. And through it all, Daniel said almost nothing. He ate his food, nodded occasionally, and avoided my eyes. That was when I noticed something. In the hallway visible through the dining room doorway, there were family photos hung in expensive frames. And in several of those photos, standing beside Daniel at various formal events, was a beautiful blonde woman I'd never seen before. She wore designer gowns in the photos. She smiled with the confidence of someone who belonged in that world. And in one photo, she and Daniel were clearly at some kind of gala, his arm around her waist, both of them looking like they'd stepped out of a magazine. That's Vanessa, Nicole said, catching me looking at the photos. She and Daniel dated for 3 years. Such a lovely girl. We all adored her. Catherine's face lit up in a way it hadn't all evening. Oh, Vanessa. Yes, she was wonderful. Her family has been in banking for generations. The Holbrooks, perhaps you've heard of them. I had, actually. Holbrook Capital was one of the oldest private banks in the country, managing generational wealth for some of America's richest families. I'd met Jeffrey Holbrook at an industry conference 2 years ago. Nice man, sharp mind, and absolutely ruthless in negotiations. I've heard the name, I said carefully. Vanessa is so accomplished, Catherine continued, her voice taking on a dreamy quality. She graduated summa cum laude from Dartmouth, then got her MBA from Wharton. She's a senior vice president now at her family's firm. And such impeccable taste. She always knew exactly what to wear to every occasion. The contrast to my practical dress was not subtle. Why did they break up? I asked, looking directly at Daniel. For the first time all evening, he looked genuinely uncomfortable. We just wanted different things, he said vaguely. Timing, Catherine corrected him. The timing wasn't right. Daniel was still figuring out his career. Vanessa was ready to settle down. These things happen. Nicole leaned forward. Actually, I ran into Vanessa last week at the club. She looked absolutely stunning. She was asking about you, Daniel. Wanted to know how you were doing. I watched Daniel's face carefully. There was something there, a flicker of something, guilt, interest, discomfort. It vanished quickly, but I'd seen it. That's nice of her, Daniel said, his voice carefully neutral. She's still single, you know, Nicole continued, with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Focused on her career. She told me she's not interested in dating anyone unless it's serious. She's at that point in her life where she knows what she wants. The message couldn't have been clearer. Vanessa was the one who got away. Vanessa was successful, sophisticated, from the right background. Vanessa was the woman I should have been, but clearly wasn't. Thomas cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. So Victoria, tell me about your family. Are your parents here in the city? This was the question I'd been expecting and dreading. My father passed away 8 years ago, I said quietly. My mother left when I was very young. I don't have any contact with her. Catherine's expression shifted to something that might have been sympathy in a more genuine person. Oh, how difficult. And your father, what did he do? He was a patent attorney. I saw the flicker of interest in Catherine's eyes. Lawyers were respectable. Especially patent lawyers, who often made good money. And did he leave you provided for? She asked, and I realized this was the real question. This was her trying to figure out if I had family money hiding somewhere that Daniel hadn't discovered. He left me his values, I said, which was true and simultaneously told her nothing. He taught me that character matters more than circumstances, and that how we treat people reveals who we really are. Catherine's smile tightened. How philosophical. The main course arrived, and with it, Catherine decided to escalate her campaign. You know, Victoria, I hope you won't take this the wrong way, but I do worry about Daniel sometimes. He has such a kind heart. Sometimes too kind. He tends to see the best in people, even when they might not have the best intentions. I set down my fork carefully. What do you mean by that, Mrs. Ashford? Oh, I'm not saying anything specific, dear. Just that young women today can be very strategic. And men like Daniel, from good families with good prospects, can be targets. She had just called me a gold digger. Not directly, not in words that could be definitively quoted back to her, but the implication was crystal clear. Mother, Daniel said, finally showing some backbone. That's not fair. I'm just being realistic, darling. Your father and I didn't build this life to see it taken advantage of. Catherine's eyes found mine across the table. I'm sure Victoria understands. After all, she comes from such a different background. It must be rather overwhelming, being introduced to all of this. All of what? I asked pleasantly. Catherine gestured vaguely around the room. This world. Our world. The expectations, the social obligations, the way things are done. It's not something you can learn overnight. It's something you're raised with. Or something you marry into? I suggested, remembering her earlier comment about joining the family herself. Her smile turned icy. Some people adapt better than others. The rest of the dinner passed in increasingly uncomfortable silence, broken only by Catherine and Nicole's attempts to steer the conversation back to stories about their world, charity galas I hadn't attended, vacation homes I'd never visited, people I'd never met and presumably never would. When dessert was finally served, some elaborate chocolate confection that probably took hours to prepare, Catherine made her final move. Daniel, darling, your father and I need to discuss something with you. Why don't you come to the study after dinner? Just for a few minutes. It wasn't a request. Victoria, perhaps Nicole could show you the gardens? Catherine suggested with false brightness. They're particularly lovely in the evening. I was being dismissed. Separated from Daniel so they could speak to him privately. About me, undoubtedly. That sounds lovely, I said, matching her artificial tone perfectly. Nicole led me out through the French doors to the back terrace, and for the first few minutes, we walked in silence through the gardens, which were indeed beautiful in a manicured, lifeless sort of way. Everything was perfectly trimmed, perfectly placed, perfectly devoid of actual life. Finally, Nicole spoke. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. You seem like a nice person, but you're not right for Daniel. I stopped walking and turned to face her. Why is that? Because you don't fit, she said bluntly. You don't understand our world, our expectations. Daniel needs someone who can navigate his future with him. Someone who understands business dinners and charity events and how to talk to the right people. Someone who can be an asset to his career, not a liability. Someone like Vanessa? I asked. Nicole had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. Vanessa understood how things work. She and Daniel made sense together. Everyone thought so. Everyone except Daniel, apparently, since they broke up. That was a mistake, Nicole said firmly. He realizes that now. Or he will, once he spends more time with her again. My blood ran cold. What do you mean, spends more time with her again? Nicole looked like she'd said too much. I just mean, they're bound to run into each other. They travel in the same circles. But I knew there was more to it than that. I could see it in the way she wouldn't meet my eyes, the way she suddenly became very interested in a nearby rosebush. We returned to the house shortly after, and I found Daniel waiting for me in the foyer, looking pale and stressed. Ready to go? He asked, too quickly, too eagerly. Sure, I said. The goodbye with his parents was mercifully brief. Catherine kissed Daniel's cheek and gave me a handshake that was somehow even limper than before. Thomas gave me a sympathetic smile that suggested he understood his wife's behavior was appalling, but felt powerless to stop it. Nicole had disappeared. The ride home was quiet. Daniel drove with both hands gripping the steering wheel, his jaw tight. I'm sorry, he finally said as we pulled up to what he thought was my apartment building. My mother can be difficult. Difficult. I repeated. Daniel, she basically called me a gold digger. She didn't mean it like that. Then how did she mean it? He sighed. She's just protective. She wants to make sure I'm making good decisions. And dating me is a bad decision? I didn't say that. But that's what she thinks. That's what Nicole thinks. That's what your whole family thinks. Daniel turned off the engine but didn't move to get out. Look, they just need time to get to know you. Once they see how great you are. Daniel, they don't want to see how great I am. They've already decided I'm not good enough. I'm not Vanessa. At the mention of her name, Daniel flinched. What is it with Vanessa? I demanded. Why does your family keep bringing her up? Why are her photos still all over your parents' house? They knew her for 3 years. Of course there are photos. Are you still in touch with her? The pause before he answered told me everything I needed to know. We run into each other sometimes, he said carefully. We have mutual friends. Are you still in love with her? No. God, no. Vicky, I'm with you. I proposed to you, remember? He had proposed to me 3 weeks earlier in a restaurant that was expensive but not fancy, with a ring that had belonged to his grandmother. At the time, I'd thought it was romantic. Now I wondered if it had been calculated, proposed with a family heirloom so his mother couldn't complain about him spending money on the wrong woman. I should go, I said, gathering my purse. Vicky, wait. I'm tired, Daniel. It's been a long night. I got out of the car before he could protest further and walked toward the building entrance. I could feel his eyes on me as I punched in the code and disappeared inside. But I didn't go up to my actual apartment, the penthouse that took up the entire top floor. Instead, I sat in the lobby for 15 minutes, making sure Daniel had driven away, and then I made a decision. I pulled out my phone and opened my secure email. I had access to databases that most people didn't even know existed. Background checks, financial records, corporate filings, all perfectly legal for someone in my position to access for due diligence purposes. I started with the Ashford family. What I found over the next 2 hours, sitting in that lobby with my laptop open, changed everything. The Ashford family wasn't nearly as wealthy as they pretended to be. In fact, they were in serious financial trouble. Thomas's commercial real estate business had taken massive hits during the last economic downturn and never fully recovered. They'd borrowed heavily against their properties, and now several of those loans were coming due. The house I'd just been in, the family estate that had supposedly been in the family for generations, was mortgaged to the hilt. They were 3 months behind on payments. Catherine's charity work was real, but a closer look at the organizations revealed that they were less about philanthropy and more about maintaining social status. She served on boards that required substantial annual contributions they could barely afford. Nicole's beautiful downtown condo wasn't hers. It was rented. And she was 2 months behind on rent. Daniel's job at the consulting firm was fine, respectable, but he wasn't exactly climbing the ladder. His performance reviews, which I probably shouldn't have been able to access, but did through a contact who owed me a favor, were mediocre. He was comfortable, coasting, not showing the drive or brilliance that would lead to partnership. And then I found the real bombshell. There was a deal in the works. A major one. Thomas Ashford was trying to put together a commercial development project that would save the family business. But he needed capital, a lot of it. More than any bank would lend him given his current financial situation. The potential investor? Holbrook Capital. Vanessa's family's bank. I sat back, my mind racing. This wasn't about love or compatibility or even social class. This was about money. This was about survival. The Ashford family needed the Holbrook family's capital, and they needed it desperately. And what better way to secure that capital than to marry Daniel to Vanessa? I spent the next 3 days doing more research. I called in favors, spoke to contacts in the banking industry, and pieced together the whole picture. The Holbrooks were interested in the development project, but they were cautious. They'd been burned by bad investments before. They wanted assurance that the Ashfords were stable, reliable partners. A marriage between the families would provide that assurance. It would be a sign of commitment, of intertwined interests. It would make the Holbrooks more likely to invest. And that's why my existence was such a problem. I was an obstacle to a multi-million-dollar deal. On the 4th day after the dinner, Daniel called me. He sounded excited, almost manic. Vicky, I have amazing news. Can I come over? Sure, I said. When he arrived at the building, I met him in the lobby rather than bringing him up to what he thought was my cramped shared apartment. He didn't seem to notice the nice lobby, the doorman, the expensive art on the walls. He was too focused on what he wanted to tell me. "I've been thinking," he said, taking my hands in his. "About us. About our future. And I realize I've been doing this all wrong." "What do you mean?" "The way I proposed. It was nice, but it wasn't special enough. You deserve something more. Something bigger." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small box. Not the same box from his first proposal. "I know my family can be overwhelming," he continued. "And I know that dinner was rough. But I want you to know that you're what matters to me. You're who I choose." He opened the box. Inside was a new ring, a large, flashy diamond in a platinum setting. It looked expensive. Very expensive. More expensive than a man with his salary should have been able to afford. "Daniel," I said slowly, "where did you get this?" "My mother gave it to me." "It was her mother's. She said she wanted you to have it." My heart sank. This wasn't a gesture of acceptance. This was a chess move. They were publicly claiming me, marking me with their ring, before they disposed of me. They wanted it to look like they'd welcomed me, tried their best, before the inevitable breakup. "Daniel, we need to talk." "Wait, let me do this properly." He started to get down on one knee right there in the lobby. "Daniel, don't." But he was already kneeling, holding up the ring, his face full of hope and excitement, and absolutely no awareness of the trap he was walking us both into. "Victoria Chin, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life showing you how much you mean to me?" The doorman was watching. A couple coming in stopped to see what was happening. Everyone was looking at us. I could say no. I could tell him right now that I knew about his family's financial troubles, about the deal with the Holbrooks, about what his family was planning. I could end this here, walk away, never look back. But as I looked at Daniel's face, I realized something. He might not be fully aware of the plan, but he wasn't innocent either. He'd stood by while his family insulted me. He'd said nothing when they compared me unfavorably to Vanessa. He'd brought up this new proposal suspiciously soon after that disastrous dinner. Was he part of the plan? Or was he just weak enough to be used by his family? Either way, I deserved to know the truth. "Yes," I said. "I'll marry you." His face broke into a huge smile. He slipped the ring onto my finger. It was slightly too large, hadn't been sized for me, because of course it hadn't, and stood up to kiss me. Everyone in the lobby clapped. And I began planning. Over the next 3 weeks, I played the role of the happy fiancé perfectly. I attended dinners with Daniel's family, where Catherine's treatment of me shifted from openly hostile to subtly condescending. She was warmer now, more welcoming, but in a way that felt calculated rather than genuine. She was playing her part in the larger scheme. Nicole started including me in texts about wedding planning, sending me Pinterest boards and venue suggestions. Every venue she recommended was far beyond what someone with my supposed income could afford. When I gently mentioned budget concerns, she'd wave them away. "Don't worry about that right now. Let's just dream." But I noticed other things too. The way Daniel's phone would buzz with messages he'd quickly hide. The way he'd mention meeting old friends for drinks, but be vague about who. The way he'd come home smelling like expensive perfume that wasn't mine. So I followed him. 3 times over those 3 weeks, I followed him to dinner, to drinks, to lunch meetings. And every single time, he was with Vanessa. I took photos. I documented everything. The way he'd take her hand across the table. The way she'd laugh and touch his arm. The way they'd linger over goodbye, like neither wanted to leave. He was hedging his bets. Keeping me engaged while maintaining his relationship with Vanessa. And his family knew. I was certain of it. I also did more digging into the Holbrook-Ashford deal. I found out that the investment was moving forward, contingent on certain family connections being solidified. I found emails obtained through means I won't specify between Catherine and Vanessa's mother discussing timelines and expectations. They were planning to break us up, but not until after they'd secured the investment. They wanted a few months of trying to make it work before discovering some convenient reason why I wasn't suitable. Maybe I'd have a scandalous past they'd uncover. Maybe I'd prove to be unstable or inappropriate. They'd find something. In the meantime, Daniel would continue seeing Vanessa, getting closer to her, so that when the breakup inevitably happened, He'd have somewhere and someone to land. It was actually brilliant, in a cold, calculated way. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd assumed I was nobody. They'd assumed I was powerless. They'd assumed that because I wore simple clothes and drove an old car and said I worked in portfolio management, that I had no resources, no connections, no ability to fight back. The engagement party was scheduled for 3 weeks after the proposal. Catherine insisted on hosting it at their home. To properly introduce you to our circle, she said with that frozen smile. I spent those 3 weeks preparing. I made phone calls. I arranged meetings. I coordinated with people in my network who were very interested in what I had to share. And on the night before the party, I gave Daniel one last chance. We were at his apartment, supposedly reviewing final details for the party. I sat across from him at his kitchen table and asked him directly, Daniel, is there anything you want to tell me? Anything at all? Any secrets, any doubts, anything I should know before tomorrow? He looked at me with those blue eyes that I'd once found so attractive. No, babe. Everything's perfect. I can't wait for tomorrow. Can't wait to show you off to everyone. What about Vanessa? I asked quietly. His face went pale. Just for a second, but I saw it. What about her? Are you still seeing her? We're friends, Vicky. That's all. I told you we run in the same circles. Friends who have dinner together 3 times a week? What? I don't. Friends who hold hands across the table? He stood up, and I saw the calculation in his eyes. He was deciding whether to lie or come clean, weighing his options. He chose lying. You're being paranoid, he said. I love you. I proposed to you. Twice. Why would I be seeing Vanessa? That's what I'd like to know. Vicky, you're stressed about meeting everyone tomorrow. I get it. But you're imagining things. There's nothing going on with Vanessa. She's just an old friend. I nodded slowly. Okay, if you say so. I do say so. He came around the table and pulled me into a hug. Everything's going to be perfect tomorrow. You'll see. I left his apartment and went home to my penthouse, where I laid out the dress I would wear to the party. Not the modest, understated dress Daniel expected. No, this dress was custom-made by a designer whose waiting list was 2 years long. This dress cost more than Catherine's entire wardrobe. Tomorrow, the Ashford family would learn exactly who they'd been underestimating. Tomorrow, I would stop pretending to be poor. The morning of the engagement party, I woke up early and went through my normal routine. Coffee, workout, shower. But then, instead of reaching for the simple clothes I'd been wearing for the past year, I opened the other side of my closet. The side Daniel had never seen. I selected a dress in deep sapphire blue, with clean lines and perfect tailoring that screamed expensive to anyone who knew how to look. I paired it with shoes that cost more than my car, my real car, the one I kept in a private garage across town, not the Honda I drove around Daniel. I chose jewelry carefully, my father's watch, which was a vintage Patek Philippe worth approximately $200,000, and a simple diamond necklace that had belonged to his mother. Just these 2 pieces represented more wealth than the entire Ashford family currently possessed. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. For almost a year, I'd been hiding, playing small, pretending to be less than I was. Tonight, I would be exactly who I was. The party started at 7 p.m., but I deliberately arrived at 7:30. Fashionably late, but not so late that it seemed rude. I wanted people to already be there. I wanted an audience. As I pulled up to the Ashford house, this time in my Tesla Model S, all black, sleek and unmistakably expensive, I saw valets scrambling to figure out where to park it among the Mercedes and BMWs. One of them actually asked if I was a guest or a vendor. I smiled and handed him my keys. Guest. The walk from the driveway to the front door felt like a runway. I could see faces in the windows, people noticing my arrival, registering confusion. Who is this woman? She looked familiar but different. What was going on? Daniel met me at the door, and the expression on his face was priceless. Confusion, shock, and something that might have been fear all flickered across his features in rapid succession. Vicky? What, I mean, you look, where did you? Hi, honey, I said warmly, kissing his cheek. Sorry I'm a bit late. You know how traffic is. Your car. Oh, I borrowed a friend's car. Mine's in the shop. The lie came easily. I'd gotten good at lying this past year, learning from the best, his family. Inside, the house had been transformed. White roses everywhere, champagne fountains, waiters in formal attire circulating with hors d'oeuvres. Catherine had spared no expense for this party, probably borrowed heavily to make it happen, all to maintain the appearance of wealth they no longer had. The guests were a mix of the Ashfords' social circle, business associates, country club friends, society figures who ran in their world. I recognized several faces from my research. People who could make or break Thomas's development deal. People whose opinions mattered in the circles where the Ashfords needed to maintain their standing. And there, near the champagne fountain, holding court like a queen at her own party, was Catherine Ashford. She wore a cream-colored gown that was undeniably beautiful and probably cost a small fortune they didn't have. Her jewelry was impressive, a diamond necklace, matching earrings, a bracelet that caught the light with every movement. She turned as I entered, her welcoming smile already in place, and then her face did something I will never forget. It went through shock, confusion, recognition, and something very close to panic in the span of about 3 seconds. "Victoria," she said, and her voice had a slight tremor in it. "How? You look different." "Thank you," I said warmly. "I thought I'd dress up for the occasion. After all, it's not every day you celebrate an engagement." Her eyes were moving rapidly, taking in every detail of my appearance. The dress, the shoes, the jewelry. I watched her brain working, trying to calculate, trying to understand. Nicole appeared at her mother's side, summoned by some invisible signal. She looked me up and down, and unlike her mother, she couldn't hide her shock. "Is that dress?" she started to ask, then stopped herself. "It's custom," I said. "A designer friend made it for me. Do you like it?" I named the designer, a name that made Nicole's eyes go wide. This was someone who dressed celebrities and royalty. Someone who didn't take commissions from junior analysts with roommates. "How did you?" Nicole started to ask. "Oh, we've known each other for years," I said casually. "Since I was in business school." She was just starting out then, and I helped connect her with some early clients. She's never forgotten it. None of this was untrue. I had indeed helped this designer when we were both young professionals. The fact that I'd helped her by using my extensive network and making introductions that led to her first major commissions was a detail I didn't need to elaborate on. "Business school." Catherine's voice had a sharp edge to it now. "I thought you went to state for undergraduate?" "I did," I confirmed. "But I went to Wharton for my MBA." I watched that information land. Wharton. The same school where Vanessa had gotten her MBA. One of the most prestigious business schools in the world. Not the kind of place that junior analysts typically attended. Before Catherine could formulate her next question, I excused myself to greet some of the other guests. I moved through the room with purpose, introducing myself, making connections. And with each conversation, I watched the confusion spread. "You're Victoria? I've heard so much about you." "Really? What did you hear?" "Well, Daniel said you work in finance. I assumed you were in retail banking or something. But someone just told me you went to Wharton? And that you know the Sandersons." I did know the Sandersons. William Sanderson was on the board of one of my portfolio companies. We'd had lunch 3 times in the past year. But Daniel didn't know that and clearly hadn't mentioned it to anyone. "Oh yes, Bill and I have worked together on a few projects," I said casually. Word spread like wildfire. Within 30 minutes, everyone at the party was trying to figure out who I really was. The narrative that the Ashfords had carefully constructed, poor girl, lucky to land Daniel, grateful for the family's acceptance, was crumbling. I found Daniel near the bar, looking pale and stressed. "Vicky, what's going on? People are asking me questions I don't know how to answer. They're saying you know all these people, that you went to Wharton, that I what, Daniel? That you're successful. That you're connected. That you're not who I said you were. And who did you say I was?" He had the grace to look ashamed. "I just told people you worked in finance. That we met at a networking event." "I didn't. I mean, you never told me all of this." "You never asked," I said quietly. "You made assumptions, and I never corrected them. But every word I told you is true. I do work in finance. We did meet at a networking event. I just didn't elaborate on the details. Why not? Because I wanted to see how you'd treat someone you thought was ordinary. Someone you thought had nothing special to offer. Someone your family thought was beneath you. His face went white. Vicky. And I got my answer, didn't I? You let your family treat me like I was worthless. You stood by while they compared me to Vanessa. You never once defended me. That's not fair. I was trying to give them time to get to know you. No, you were trying to avoid conflict. There's a difference. Before he could respond, Catherine appeared, her smile strained. Excuse me, you too. Daniel, darling, your father needs to speak with you. Something about the toast. Victoria, perhaps you could help me with something in the kitchen. It wasn't a request. I followed Catherine through the house, away from the party, until we reached a small study off the main hallway. She closed the door behind us and turned to face me, all pretense of warmth gone. What are you doing? She demanded. I'm attending my engagement party, I said calmly. You know what I mean. The dress, the jewelry, the stories you're telling people. What game are you playing? I'm not playing a game, Catherine. I'm simply being myself. Yourself? Daniel told us you were a junior analyst who could barely afford rent. Daniel assumed I was a junior analyst. I never said that. He assumed I was struggling financially. I never said that either. You all made assumptions based on how I dressed and what I drove and where I said I went to school. You filled in the blanks yourselves. Her face was red now, fury barely contained. You deliberately deceived us. No, I deliberately let you reveal who you really are. And you did. Spectacularly. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the way you treated me from the moment I walked into this house. The comments about my clothes, my background, my worth. The comparisons to Vanessa. The assumption that I was a gold digger trying to trap your son. You judged me, found me lacking, and made sure I knew it. Because you weren't suitable. Catherine's mask slipped completely. You're not from our world. You don't understand how things work. Daniel needs someone who can help his career, someone who can support the family's interests, not some nobody who. Who what? Who doesn't fit your plan? Catherine's eyes narrowed. What plan? The plan to marry Daniel to Vanessa so the Holbrooks will invest in Thomas's development project. The plan to use this engagement as a temporary arrangement until you can orchestrate a breakup and push Daniel back toward the woman you really want him to marry. The plan to save your family business by selling your son's future. The color drained from Catherine's face. How did I know? Because I did my research, Catherine. I looked into your family's finances. I found out about the development project, the loans coming due, the deal with Holbrook Capital. I know exactly how desperate you are and exactly what you're willing to do to solve your problems. For a long moment, she just stared at me. Then she composed herself, drew herself up to her full height, and said, You have no proof of any of this. And even if you did, it wouldn't matter. Daniel will never believe you. He's loyal to his family. You're right about one thing. He is loyal to his family. Sometimes too loyal. But I do have proof. And I'm going to share it. Tonight. You wouldn't dare. Watch me. I walked past her, opened the door, and made my way back to the party. The study was near the back of the house, and as I passed the kitchen, I heard voices. I slowed, recognizing them immediately. Daniel and Vanessa. I told you, this is complicated, Daniel was saying, his voice stressed. You said you'd figure it out, Vanessa replied. You said this engagement was temporary, just to buy time. But you're acting like you actually have feelings for her. I do have feelings for her. It's confusing. I thought I could just go through the motions, but what? Daniel, our families need this deal to work. Your father needs our investment, and my family won't invest unless they're confident in the partnership. You know what that means. I know what my mother wants it to mean. It's not just your mother. It's my family too. They want assurances. They want to know we're serious about combining our futures. There was a pause, and then I heard movement. When I carefully peered around the corner, I saw them embracing. Not a friendly hug. Something more. Something intimate. I miss you, Vanessa said softly. I miss us. I miss you too, Daniel admitted. But I'm engaged to Victoria. I can't just. You can. You can break it off. You can tell her you made a mistake. We can be together again, the way we should have been all along. I didn't wait to hear his response. I had what I needed. I walked back to the main room, where guests were mingling, drinking champagne, admiring the flowers. I found Nicole near the windows and asked her where I might find Thomas. He's probably in his office. Why? I need to speak with him about something. Business-related. Nicole's eyebrows rose, but she pointed me toward a door off the main hallway. I found Thomas in his office, looking over some papers, his face tired and stressed. He looked up when I knocked, and I saw the same confusion everyone else had shown when they saw me tonight. Victoria. Is everything all right? May I come in? Of course. I entered and closed the door behind me. Thomas, I need to tell you something. I'm not who you think I am. He set down his papers. I'm beginning to get that impression. Catherine is very upset. She says you've been deceiving us. I've been letting you make assumptions, I corrected. But she's right that I haven't been completely honest about who I am. I proceeded to tell him everything. My real job, my wealth, my company. I told him about my father and the lessons he'd taught me. I told him why I'd hidden my identity. And then I told him what I'd discovered about his business, his financial troubles, and the plan his wife had orchestrated. Thomas listened without interrupting, his face growing grayer with each revelation. When I finished, he sat back in his chair, looking like a man who'd been carrying a heavy weight for too long and had finally set it down. You're right, he said quietly. About all of it. Catherine has been pushing this plan for months. Get Daniel engaged to Vanessa, secure the Holbrook investment, save the business. I've been going along with it because I don't know what else to do. We're drowning, Victoria. Not just financially. In every way that matters. And my relationship with Daniel? Where did I fit into this plan? Thomas looked ashamed. You were supposed to be temporary. A phase. Catherine thought Daniel was dating you as some kind of rebellion and that it would burn out naturally. When he proposed to you, she panicked. That's when she started really pushing the Vanessa angle. She thought if she could just keep them in contact, remind Daniel of what they'd had, he'd realize his mistake. And Daniel? Did he know about this? Thomas hesitated. I don't think he knew the full extent of it. But he knew his mother disapproved of you. And he knew Vanessa was still interested. Whether he was actively part of the plan or just weak enough to go along with it. I honestly don't know. I nodded. I'd suspected as much. There's one more thing you should know, I said. I have contacts at Holbrook Capital. The investment in your development project? It's not as certain as you think. The Holbrooks are cautious. They've been burned before. Even with a marriage between the families, there's no guarantee they'd invest. Thomas closed his eyes. Of course not. Catherine has been so focused on this plan that she hasn't considered it might not even work. But I might be able to help you, I said. Not with the Holbrook investment. I think you should pursue that on its own merits, without family manipulation involved. But I know other investors. People who might be interested in the project if the fundamentals are sound. Why would you help me? After everything my family has done to you. Because you're not Catherine. You're not Nicole. You're a man who got in over his head and is trying to save his life's work. I respect that. And because, despite everything, I believe good business should be supported by merit, not by family machinations. Thomas looked at me for a long moment. You're a remarkable woman, Victoria. My son is a fool if he doesn't see it. Thank you. But I think it's time everyone here learned exactly how foolish Daniel has been. I left Thomas in his office and returned to the party. The energy had shifted. More people had arrived, and the main room was now quite crowded. Perfect. I found a waiter and asked him to let Catherine know that I was ready for the toasts whenever she was. The poor man looked confused. I was the fiancé, not supposed to be coordinating with the hosts, but he nodded and went to find her. 5 minutes later, Catherine appeared, her composure regained, but her eyes wary. She gave a signal, and the live music stopped. Conversation gradually quieted. Everyone, Catherine said, her voice projecting through the room with practiced ease. Thank you so much for being here tonight to celebrate this joyous occasion. My son Daniel has found someone special, and we're thrilled to welcome Victoria into our family. The lie was so smooth, so practiced, I almost admired it. Daniel, darling, come up here, she continued. Daniel emerged from wherever he'd been hiding, probably still in the kitchen with Vanessa, and made his way to his mother's side. His eyes found mine in the crowd, and I saw worry there. Fear, even. Daniel would like to say a few words, Catherine announced. Daniel cleared his throat. Thank you all for coming. It means a lot to have everyone here. Victoria and I are very happy, and we're looking forward to. Actually, I interrupted, stepping forward. I'd like to say something, if I may. Catherine's smile became rigid. Of course, dear. We'd love to hear from you. I accepted the champagne glass someone handed me and turned to face the crowd. All eyes were on me. The woman they'd been told was nobody, was nothing special, was lucky to have landed Daniel Ashford. Thank you, Catherine, for hosting this beautiful party, I began. And thank you all for being here tonight. I want to tell you a story about how Daniel and I met. I proceeded to describe our meeting at the networking event, keeping it light and charming. People smiled, nodded, clearly expecting a sweet romantic tale. When Daniel asked what I did for a living, I told him I worked in finance. He made some assumptions about what that meant, and I didn't correct him. Over the months we dated, he continued to make assumptions. About my job, my income, my background. And I let him. The smiles were fading now, replaced by confusion and curiosity. I let him believe I was struggling financially. That I was just an ordinary woman working an ordinary job. I let his family believe the same thing. And do you know why? Silence. Complete, total silence. Because my father taught me something very important before he died. He taught me that a person's true character only shows when they think you have nothing to offer them. When they believe you're beneath their notice. When they think you can't help them in any way. I looked at Catherine, then at Nicole, then at Daniel. The Ashford family showed me their true character. They treated me with contempt. They compared me to Daniel's ex-girlfriend and found me lacking. They made it clear that I wasn't good enough, wasn't suitable, wasn't worthy of their son. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Catherine's face had gone white. But here's the thing, I continued. I'm not who they think I am. My name is Victoria Chin, and I'm the founder and CEO of Chin Equity Partners. I manage a portfolio worth over $200 million. I have equity stakes in 7 companies, 3 of which you've definitely heard of. I went to Wharton for my MBA. And I'm worth approximately $42 million. The room erupted. People talking, gasping, pulling out their phones to Google my name and my company. I waited for the noise to die down. I didn't tell Daniel any of this because I wanted to see if he and his family would value me for who I am, not what I'm worth. And they failed that test spectacularly. I pulled out my phone and displayed the photos I'd taken of Daniel and Vanessa. Large enough for people nearby to see, clear enough to show the intimacy of their interactions. I also discovered that this engagement was never meant to last. The Ashford family is in financial trouble. They need investment from Vanessa's family to save their business. The plan was to use me as a temporary placeholder while they orchestrated a reunion between Daniel and Vanessa. They thought I was too stupid, too naive, too grateful for Daniel's attention to ever figure it out. Catherine found her voice. This is outrageous. You have no right to. To what? To tell the truth? To expose the fact that you were using me? That you were planning to break up my engagement for your financial benefit? I turned to Daniel, who looked like he might be sick. Daniel, I give you so many chances to be honest with me. Last night, I asked you directly if there was anything you needed to tell me. You lied. You're still lying. Even now, even with Vanessa somewhere in this house, you're lying. Victoria, I can explain. No, I said firmly. You can't. There's no explanation that makes this okay. You let your family treat me like garbage. You maintained a relationship with your ex-girlfriend while engaged to me. You were either actively part of their plan or too weak to stand against it. Either way, I deserve better. I removed the engagement ring from my finger, Catherine's family ring that had never really been meant for me, and held it out to Daniel. I'm not going to marry you, Daniel. I never really intended to, not after I found out the truth. The only reason I said yes to this proposal was to give you and your family enough rope to hang yourselves. And you did. I handed him the ring. He took it mechanically, his face ashen. I want all of you to know something, I said, addressing the crowd one final time. Wealth isn't measured in dollar signs. Character isn't determined by social status. The Ashford family thought they could judge my worth based on how I dressed and what I drove. They were wrong. I looked at Catherine. You taught me an important lesson, Catherine. You showed me that money can't buy class, breeding doesn't guarantee character, and a desperate family will sacrifice anything, even their son's happiness, to maintain appearances. I set down my champagne glass and looked at Daniel one last time. I hope you and Vanessa will be very happy together. I hope the Holbrook investment works out. And I hope someday you learn to stand up for yourself and for what's right, instead of just going along with whatever your family wants. Then I turned and walked out. The crowd parted like water. No one tried to stop me. No one said a word. The only sound was my heels clicking on the marble floor. Behind me, I heard chaos erupting. Catherine's voice, shrill and desperate, trying to explain. Nicole saying something about this being a misunderstanding. Thomas, surprisingly, saying nothing at all. And Daniel, calling my name, but not following me. Never following me. I walked out into the night air, feeling lighter than I had in months. The valet brought my car around, his eyes wide with recognition. He'd been inside, had heard everything or had it quickly relayed to him. Have a good evening, miss, he said respectfully as I tipped him generously. I will, I said. I really will. I drove home to my penthouse, changed out of my expensive dress into comfortable pajamas, and made myself a cup of tea. Then I sat by my floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the city lights, and felt at peace. My phone started buzzing almost immediately. Text messages, calls, voicemails. Daniel, begging to explain. Catherine, threatening to sue me for defamation. Nicole, saying I'd misunderstood everything. Thomas, surprisingly, sending a simple message. Thank you for the truth. And for the business referrals. I'll handle them with integrity. I deleted most of them without reading. But I saved Thomas's message. He at least deserved credit for recognizing reality when it slapped him in the face. Over the next few days, the story spread. Not because I wanted it to, I'd asked the guests to keep it private, and most did, but because that kind of drama has a way of leaking out. Within a week, people in the industry knew. Within 2 weeks, it had become a cautionary tale in social circles. The Ashford family's reputation took a significant hit. Turns out, using your son as a pawn in a business deal doesn't play well with people who value integrity. Several of their social circle quietly distanced themselves. The country club membership became awkward. Daniel tried to reach out dozens of times. I blocked his number after the 15th desperate voicemail. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he and Vanessa did get back together, but it was messy and complicated and neither of them seemed particularly happy. The Holbrook investment fell through. Apparently, Vanessa's family decided that the Ashfords were too unstable a partner, too willing to manipulate personal relationships for business gain. They invested in a different project instead. But Thomas, true to his word, reached out to the contacts I'd provided. And because he approached them honestly, with realistic projections and genuine integrity, he secured different investors. The development project moved forward, though on a smaller scale than originally planned. It would save the family business, but they'd never again live the lifestyle they'd pretended to maintain. Catherine and Nicole had to adjust to a new reality where they actually had to be careful about money, where they couldn't just buy their way into social acceptance, where their behavior had consequences. I heard all of this through the grapevine, through business contacts and social connections that were genuinely mine and always had been. I didn't seek out information about the Ashfords, but in the interconnected world of business and society, news travels. As for me, I went back to my life. My real life. I stopped pretending to be someone I wasn't. I stopped hiding my success. I drove my Tesla every day. I wore clothes from my actual closet. I attended events and conferences and board meetings as myself. And you know what? It felt amazing. 3 months after the engagement party, I was at a charity gala, one I was actually hosting, using my own money to support scholarships for first-generation college students, when I ran into an old friend from business school. Victoria. I heard about what happened with the Ashfords. That took guts. It took honesty, I corrected. Which should never require guts, but somehow does. Any regrets? I thought about it. Just one. I regret not telling Daniel the truth from the beginning. Not because I think it would have changed anything, I don't, but because I lowered myself to their level by being deceptive, even if my deception was passive rather than active. You think you should have been upfront? I think I should have been myself from day one. I thought I was being clever, testing his character. But really, I was just protecting myself from rejection. I was afraid that if he knew the truth about me, about my wealth and success, he'd be intimidated or resentful or treat me differently. And by hiding, I guaranteed that outcome. So what's next for you? Next, I date like a normal person. No games, no tests, no hiding. If someone can't handle who I really am, successful, wealthy, ambitious, then they're not right for me. And that's okay. Sounds healthy. It is. It really is. 6 months after that disastrous engagement party, I got a letter. Physical mail, handwritten, from Daniel. I almost threw it away without reading it. But curiosity won. The letter was long and rambling, but the core message was clear. He was sorry. He was ashamed. He'd realized, too late, that he'd lost something real because he was too weak to stand up to his family and too confused to understand his own feelings. He wrote that he'd broken up with Vanessa, that he'd started therapy, that he was trying to become the kind of man who could recognize truth and value character and stand up for what's right. He wrote that he didn't expect forgiveness, didn't expect a second chance, didn't expect anything. He just wanted me to know that I'd taught him something important, even if he'd learned it the hard way. I read the letter twice, then filed it away. Not as something I'd treasure or refer back to, but as a piece of evidence that people can grow, can change, can learn from their mistakes. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Daniel's journey of self-improvement was his own, not something I needed to be part of. But I did think about his letter later that night, sitting by my window with my tea, looking out over the city. I thought about my father and the lessons he'd taught me. About character and integrity and the difference between wealth and worth. My father had been right about people revealing their true selves when they think you have nothing to offer them. The Ashford family had revealed exactly who they were. But in the process, I'd revealed something about myself too, that I was willing to hide, to test, to manipulate situations to protect myself. That wasn't who I wanted to be. Going forward, I made a promise to myself. I would be honest. I would be authentic. I would present myself as I really was, and I would trust that the right people would value me for it while the wrong people would reveal themselves naturally. No more tests. No more games. Just truth. Before I end this story, I want to say one more thing. If you're still watching, thank you. Stories like mine about family drama, betrayal, and finding your own worth are what Bridal Confessions is all about. We share a new story every single day, each one true, each one a lesson about love and life and human nature. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to our channel. Hit that bell so you're notified when we post new content. And drop a comment below telling me what you think. Would you have done what I did? Should I have been honest from the start? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Remember, your worth isn't determined by what others think of you. It's determined by who you are when no one important is watching, by the choices you make when they're hard, by the integrity you maintain even when it would be easier to compromise. The Ashfords taught me that lesson in reverse. They showed me what happens when you let external validation and financial desperation override your values. They showed me the cost of pretending to be something you're not, of using people as pawns, of measuring worth in dollar signs. I don't regret the experience. I learned from it. But I'm grateful it's over. These days, when people ask me about my biggest professional success, I tell them about the companies I've invested in, the innovations I've supported, the wealth I've created. But when people ask about my biggest personal success, I tell them about the night I walked out of that engagement party. The night I chose truth over comfort, integrity over acceptance, myself over someone else's expectations. That was the night I stopped pretending to be poor and naive. That was the night I finally became rich in the ways that actually matter. And that's a wealth no one can ever take away.